When I was a little kid, my family, mom, dad, and two older sisters, lived in a condominium complex. The small smattering of condos made up a very tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone. When I was 11 years old in 1993, a new family moved into the complex. It became quickly apparent that these people were going to be very different from our other neighbors, a real unsavory group of people. Their music would blast loudly into the night, constant shouting matches between the husband and wife would turn violent and police would be called. And equally unsavory, let's call them visitors, would drive through the neighborhood only to stop by for a few minutes, then leave after product was exchanged for cash. Having had enough of this family's antics, the neighborhood association, made up of the parents of several of my friends, including mine, petitioned the owners of the complex to evict the family, which came to fruition in August of 1993, only a few months after they moved in. Needless to say, the patriarch of the family was not happy he and his brood had been shown the door, and he vowed to get back at everyone, a seemingly idle threat. Several weeks later, his threat seemed like a distant memory, and with Halloween quickly approaching, preparations were underway for the ghoulish festivities. However, before the 31st, we had to deal with the 30th, which, depending on where you are in this world, is known by several names like Mischief Night, Devil's Night, or in my neck of the woods, it is known as Cabbage Night due to a long-standing tradition of leaving skunk cabbage, a blood-red flowering plant that smells like skunk and is mildly toxic, on people's doorsteps. This particular October 30th, my mother and I were putting out some last-minute decorations, mainly cheap ones recently bought from a local store called Caldor, and we carved jack-o'-lanterns when all of a sudden the smell of burning wood filled our noses. Our initial assumption that someone had a fire going was quickly dashed when an eerie orange glow from the wooded area that separated our complex from the neighboring street could be seen. Soon, a heavy cloud of smoke covered our neighborhood, and the fire department had been called. One good thing about our apartment was the fact that the safety complex where the police and fire departments were located was basically a stone's throw away. After hooking up their hoses to the hydrants, the fire was quickly extinguished before it could spread to the houses, and the excitement quickly died down. The next day, as us kids excitedly counted down the hours to trick-or-treat, the adults worried as to what caused the fire. They fortunately didn't have to wait too long, because a security camera mounted at the complex's entrance provided the answer when an all-too-familiar black pickup truck was spotted entering and then quickly exiting several moments later. While I'm not sure if anything happened to the overzealous former neighbor of ours, he did stop coming around. My mother and two older brothers would visit my aunt and three cousins around Christmas. The whole family would get together too, uncles, aunts, you name it. Anyway, they lived up near Inverness in Scotland in a place called the Black Isles. It's actually in a place called Cromarty, but Inverness is more well known, so I'll just say that. The Black Isles were said to be used back in the day as a place where witches would meet up on Halloween and perform satanic rituals and animal sacrifices. Whether or not that is true is another story. Now to get to the story, we all rented out a holiday home just down the road from my cousin's house. It had multiple bedrooms in it, so it was perfect for a lot of guests. Me, one of my older brothers, and his friend from Africa were all staying in one room. They were fast asleep. I, however, was not. I woke suddenly, and I didn't know why. I scanned the room with my bleary eyes. It was very dark. I couldn't hear anything except for the snores from my brother and his friend. The door to the room slowly opened with a creak. I froze with fear. I didn't see anything enter through it, but as I tried to scan my eyes around the room, I started to see shadow-like figures hovering and pulsating over my brother and his friend. There must have been at least 3 of these figures. The third one stood over my bed. Although this apparition didn't have any human-like features, except for maybe the shape of something human-like, I could still feel it staring right at me. I decided then that the only course of action was to turn over to face the wall and go to sleep. The morning after, I told my experiences to a few of my family members, and they joked that it might be witches that performed those rituals in the past and generally didn't believe me. Except one person, my brother's girlfriend. She told me she experienced something as well. She was only sleeping next door, and she told me she felt like someone sat down on the end of her bed in the night, and she could feel the weight of someone on her legs, but nothing was there. Very frightened by this, I decided to read the guest book to see if anyone else reported anything weird and unusual, but nothing of the sort was there. I'll never forget what I saw that night, and if you're ever up near the Black Isles or stay in the same holiday home I did, just be aware of any strange figures entering your room at night. This story is so cliche and ridiculous that no one ever believes it's real except for the people that were there. It was Halloween 2012, my senior year of high school. I went to a Catholic school, so we always had the day after Halloween off because it's considered a church holy day. So my friends were game to start our weekend early. On nights where we didn't go to parties, we usually do the same thing. We'd sit on my front steps for a couple of hours and joke around. Then we would walk the neighborhood and usually end up at this shitty pizza place across town because the prices were so cheap. Since a few of us had recently broken up with our girlfriends, we weren't in much of a party mood, so we did our usual. It's around 10:30 p.m. and the pizza joint is closing up for the night. There were 3 of us, me, my friend Pat, and my friend Jack. We finish our food, refill our drinks, and head out. To get back to my house, we had to cross this large mall parking lot that's about 4 football fields long and 2 wide. I should mention at this point that we aren't dumb, naive kids. We all had grown up in the city and had our fair share of urban experiences. All 3 of us were pretty streetwise and were competent out on the street by ourselves, but we experienced something that night that we were totally unprepared for. So we're walking through this parking lot and it's absolutely desolate, not a soul in sight. Suddenly we see a white tradesman van creeping slowly behind us about 100 yards back. I know the old white van cliche, but I swear it's a real story. I point it out to my friends and we pick up our pace. We pop the collars on our jackets and hunch out our shoulders to make us seem a bit bigger than we are. In an instant, the van speeds up and cuts off our path. Everything in the van is pitch black, so we can't see any people. That's when someone calls out in a non-threatening voice, "Hey man, happy Halloween. You guys like Halloween?" Despite the jovial manner in which this was said, a van doesn't cut you off in a parking lot unless it has bad intentions. We had nowhere to go. We could run, but they're in a van. They would catch up to us easily and we'd have to turn our backs to them. He says it again. "Hey man, you guys like Halloween?" I respond, trying to sound tough. "Yeah, but it's over now, so we're heading home and you're in our way." "Nah dude, Halloween ain't over. We still got tons of candy in here." The tone suddenly shifted and still we couldn't see anyone in the van. The 3 of us puff out our chests and get ready for a fight. After a brief silence that felt like it dragged on for hours, Jack cut the tension by sternly saying, "Listen, dickhead, I don't know what you think you're about to do, but if you don't leave, we're gonna kick your ass." Once he said that, the back door of the van swung open and 2 very tall men stepped out. They had black suits with black leather gloves and were well built and strong looking. But the most menacing thing was that they were both wearing these cheap Mitt Romney masks. That's when we realized this wasn't a Halloween prank. At that moment, all 3 of us went to take off, but the van started driving circles around us. There was no place for us to go. We had no idea how we were going to get out of this situation. I have no idea what these guys were planning to do with 3 18-year-old men, but they seemed like they knew what they were doing, and we were all getting ready for the fight of our lives. The van stopped, and it looked like they were about to make their move. This was it. I mentioned that there were 3 of us that night. It was at this moment that my other friend Pat, the one that had stayed silent up to this point, leaned into both of us and quietly said, "This is a Hail Mary, but get ready to freaking run when I say go, alright?" He then picked up one of our sodas and threw it with all his might at the driver's side window. The window was open and the cup miraculously connected with the driver's head. Pat screamed, "Run!" and we took off across the parking lot. The van squealed off in the other direction and we hurried our asses home. Jack and I were both confused as to why a simple cup of soda got them to give up on their plans. Then we found out what actually happened. While we were panicking, Pat kept his cool. He nonchalantly dumped out his drink and slipped a big ass rock into his cup. Then he waited for the right moment. The driver, thinking that this kid had just thrown a drink at him, wound up getting pegged in the head with a rock. It probably knocked him out cold, or it at least bought us enough time to put some distance between us. All that was left after that was pulling off a miracle and getting the rock to actually connect. Maybe a guardian angel or God himself took care of that. I'm still amazed by it. Moral of the story, kids, don't panic when you're in a tight spot. If you lose your cool, you lose the fight.